sounds like it really sits in your hands, and you're doing just a great job. You're an incredible musician. I wanted to see which edition of the work you have. Yes, it is the last edition. I only ask because a lot of people have a different edition of the work, and I never know which one I'm working with. But we both have the same one. Okay, awesome. So I guess, gosh, there's so many places we can kind of start, and there's so many little technical things we can get into. But before we do, I'll actually ask, like, for you, maybe let me start with your questions. Like, do you have questions about this work, or is there anything that we should talk about before we dive in?
I know Darshan is the
Yeah.
Could I say that, like, maybe how long that was, is that how live is supposed to be portrayed?
That's a great interpretation of it. Yeah, I think it is. Like I was saying, it's like you don't always know what you're trying to interpret when you're writing the piece or what you're trying to convey. For me, the piece there's a lot of darkness in the piece, right? And the harmonics, you're right, it is this kind of place where things lighten up. And actually, that's kind of a good place for us to dive in because there's the melody and then there's a lot of texture. Right? And so there are places where the minute you have harmonics, you kind of know, okay, I need to be in this light world, right? What I think is interesting is before you have those harmonics, you have this kind of arpeggiando that leads into the harmonics. What are you envisioning as far as the change in the sound world? Or is there a change? What are you going for there? For so the second line, for example, does it change at all for you when it gets to the harmonics, or what's the first part like?
I feel like it's more like a transition between shots or I guess not really shots, but like it's like darkness with a rush to light.
Yeah, and I actually think because the way that you play that, maybe just play that phrase, just starting right at 3, play that whole phrase with the third sentence.
Can I transition?
Oh, sure. Yeah. Yeah, beautiful. And so you see how, in a way, you have to slow down that beginning to get to where you want to go. And it looks like it's this whole mess of 30-second notes, but you can see that there's a lot of flexibility in it, and you're playing with that flexibility. What I want you to do is start just at the beginning, and when you get to the middle of the measure that has all these that little thing in it, the grace note thing. Try to start it the same way that you started the thing at 3. Nice. I think maybe back off even more. Yeah. All right. And nice. It's getting there. Now, just try to sit a little bit more on the top notes. You don't need to make them loud, but just linger there. Enjoy them for a second. Yeah, so the idea here is that you never want to get to the place with the top notes where you always want to be in a place where you feel like they could transition into the harmonics at any moment, right? And so it takes just a little bit longer and it doesn't feel, because there's a kind of arpeggiando that you would do in the cadenza of a concerto, right? You know the kind of thing I'm talking about. Okay, this is not that. This is just like, you're always kind of trying to see what the bounds of your world are. So it's more exploratory than it is directional. The melody, I think you're right, the melody is quite directional, and you're playing it in that way, which is beautiful. All right, let's go down to essentially measure 13. As you know, these measures are a little bit weird. Maybe just start from the beginning of that measure, and what I'm interested in is how you play the grace notes in the end of that measure. Yeah, sorry. So what's interesting and I think you made a good choice to slow things down. Like that's a kind of a pacing choice, which I think is good. So this comes from this vocal technique that's like, it's basically like you attack a little bit glottally. So it's like, ah. So you see what I'm doing? I'm just kind of, so there's no way for me to do that any further away from the note. So that's kind of what you're imitating there. Beautiful. All right, and let's go on. Okay, let's go on to this really interesting moment, right? Because what happens at 22 is we hear something that we've never heard before, right? Which is essentially the bee, right? What is, in your mind, like, what is the role of the bee, and how does that tell us a little bit about how you played that moment? That's a really good. Yeah, exactly. It's a kind of arrival point, and it's a kind of point where we've been just wandering around a little bit. Because I also have to say, your soul pont sounds so amazing. Soul pont is a thing that I feel like you just have to commit to. You know what I mean? It's like it's a thing that you can't kind of do halfway. You just decide you're gonna go there, and you really committed to that soul pont. So that was really excellent. For those of you who might not know, soul pont is when you're playing almost on the bridge, and it has that like kind of wired. Actually, Julie, do you want to just play it for so people know what it is? Maybe just pick a soul pont passage and play it for us. Maybe at 11. Gorgeous. Actually, before we go on to that other section, the soul ponds. What is your feeling about how that contributes to the texture?
Well, okay, so font is a bit more airy.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, like, abstractly, I think it's more like less clear. Maybe there's some sort of conflict, or maybe like internal conflict or something like that. I feel like it's a texture change from, we just had light, so it's kind of like a transition back into the darkness.
Yeah, exactly. It's definitely transitional, and I mean, and you're right. That's a great way to interpret it. I also think for me, it feels ghost-like. It feels like they're not real notes, and so you're kind of thinking like, is this really happening? Is it not? And so if you're thinking about it between the realm of the dark stuff sometimes, and especially when you get in later to those triplets and stuff like that, it's very present, right? And then there's other stuff that's like a little bit eerie, and you're not really sure what's happening. This kind of lives in the harmonics world to me, but it's the dark side of the harmonics, right? So there's a lot of that that's interesting. But yeah, I feel like you're really committed to that. That was wonderful. Okay, so back to this arrival point of the beam. This thing starts to happen with the beaming. Have you ever seen anything like that before? The beam, like see how it does these little triangle beams. Okay. Yeah.
If you remember Zach's,
Yeah, and so these are, just tell us a little bit about what, so that everyone knows what do you do when you see, what does it look like, and what do you do?
It kind of looks like a bow. It's like it fluctuates from more flags or no flags, and then into one, which means that you have to go from faster to slower. In this case, it's from faster to slower to faster. So yeah, and then paired with that, I have what are these called? Force, the dynamics.
Right, exactly.
Which
Yeah.
also gives me plus like the rhythm plus the dynamic marking is like emphasis on rhythm.
Yeah, exactly. So this idea is like sometimes if we don't want to write, sometimes when the tempo is really flexible, because as musicians we sometimes see a thing and we just immediately make associations with everything we've played before that has that thing. So as composers, sometimes I think we do new notation, both because the thing that we want doesn't exist in standard notation, but then also because we want to kind of signify to the performer, I want you to interpret this in a new way. Right? And so basically here it's a place where she's actually, and actually Julia, maybe just go ahead and play that phrase at 22 all the way down to 25. Beautiful. And so you see how she's kind of pausing on these notes, right? And that is kind of listed in the notation. What I would say, let's try it again give the top, basically follow the phrase all the way down so that when you get to each of those lower peaks, give them a little bit less time. Nice. Now let's try something different. Let's try the higher you are, the softer you are. Yeah, exactly. It's sometimes, and you can do it either way, but I think sometimes going high and soft is opposite of what our brain thinks it is, and it kind of gives you this feeling of like, I'm reaching for something that I don't even know it's there, right? You're reaching for clouds or something. So that's a kind of, and it's a place to go because you obviously have a lot more phrases like this later on. Okay, we have a few more minutes. Is there anything that you want to play for me out of this piece that you want questions or advice or anything on?
Probably the triplet parts.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead and maybe just play it for us one more time. Yeah, just I guess starting at 25 or wherever you want to start.
Yeah, I'll do the
Okay. Gorgeous. As you were playing, so this is probably the toughest part of the piece for you, right? Yeah, or for anyone, right? A very funny story about this. So I wrote this for a violinist who, after I wrote it for him, became my husband, but wasn't at the time, so he still liked me after I wrote him this piece. But what's interesting is that it's this such a funny story because I think it was maybe the thing at 31. I asked him to kind of mess around with this tonality, and I just recorded him. Okay, and then I literally wrote out what he had played, and he came back to me and he was like, "This is impossible." And I was like, "I have a recording of you playing it. Like I know this is possible." And so it's one of those things where I don't think I would have written it in the same way if I hadn't actually heard him play it. But the feeling of it, and I think the feeling to me is where you're slowly pushing a boulder up a hill that you know there's no way you're going to get it to the other side of that hill, right? And especially at 36, that last set of triplets, I love how you started a little bit slow, and I think you can just feel that weight of like, I'm just never going to get this thing up this hill, right? And when you finally get it up there, no worries, when you finally get it up there, you're kind of you're releasing it at 40 kind of into this feeling of like it's just not going to go any further, right? So I'm curious, maybe just last thing, play 36 into basically 42. So you're playing, one of those downward things. Nice, beautiful. What I think you can do is actually, we'll play it one more time, and when you get to basically 39, that final high B, and you notice a lot of these cadences are on that B that's like so important in the piece. When you get to that B, don't rush through it. Be like, am I there? Do I feel like I'm there? Really sit on that. And then when you get to the stuff that's at measure 40, what you should do is think to yourself, can beautiful. All right, any other questions for me about this piece? Okay, well, you also know where to find me. All right, thank you, Julia, that was really gorgeous.